Hi there and welcome to the latest episode of Craig Houston Talks To, and we're back to the original format of the channel with a podcast interview guest. I'm delighted to announce that guest as the leader of Advanced, Mr. Ben Habib. So Ben, first of all, thank you very much for giving me your time today. It's a privilege and very proud to have you here on the channel. So how are you today?
Well, thank you, Craig, for having me on. A privilege to be on. I'm very well indeed. I mean, we suffer under the yoke of parliamentarians and governments that are against the people, but apart from that, I'm 100%.
As well as can be. So, first thing I need to ask you is obviously the big news advanced, you starting the party, and it seems to be doing quite well in building numbers. You seem to be hitting the targets that you've set for yourself. But just a simple question: why? Why did you do that?
Well, you know, I suspect many of us who are in politics with small c conservative view of life are in it because the Conservative Party has repeatedly failed to be small c conservative. It's lost its direction. And then, certainly in my case, I thought reform might be the answer. I had my doubts about reform, by the way, right at the beginning even, but I thought reform might be the answer. And sadly, it's been proven to me that reform is not the hope that so many people have put in it. That actually it's fast becoming really quite a peculiar mix of different political views. I'd say it doesn't have a settled political philosophy. None certainly that would stand the ability to, stand and challenge the government and restore and save and restore the United Kingdom. I don't think reform's got it. And like so many people, and I know you feel this as well, Craig, because we discussed it before you turned the recording function on, that, the United Kingdom is facing some very serious threats. This is not merely an difficult period from an economic perspective we're going through. I think the United Kingdom is facing fundamental constitutional democratic challenges. Our very existence as a country, I think, is threatened, and we can talk about that. And so in the absence of there being a political force standing up to people in Parliament and the government to protect and restore our country, I think it's incumbent on those of us who have the ability to do it to stand up ourselves and do it. And I was reluctant initially to set up a political party. I knew a political force was needed, but I was reluctant to set up a political party. But eventually, the calling became too loud. And so here I am. I didn't even want to be leader, actually. I hoped Rupert Lowe would lead this new party, but he decided against getting involved in Advance. And so here I am as leader, fighting what I hope will be a successful battle.
Now, the first objective you set out was at 30,000 members. How's that going on? I think, honest, I looked, you were doing probably better than many expected in such a short time scale.
Yeah, so the reason I it's a self-imposed hurdle of 30,000 members. And the reason I did it was because I wanted to test my own view. Not just that there's a need for a political force, but there's actually a demand by the British people for a political force. And 30,000 members is what Reform had roughly at the beginning of the general election in 2024. So, and I knew we could fight campaigns with 30,000 members, having been deputy leader of Reform. So that's the figure that I chose. It's arbitrary in a sense, but there was a practical reason for it. And I thought it might take 6 months to get to 30,000. And actually this morning I just checked and we're at 28,500. So within 9 weeks, I think it's been since we launched, we've reached 28,500 members. And I think in the next 3 or 4 days, and certainly within a week, we would have hit 30,000 members. And at that point, we will apply to the Electoral Commission for full party registration and then start doing everything that a political party does. The other thing that's going to happen when we hit 30,000 members is I will donate £100,000 to the party. And I want to do that because I want people to know that this is not some project for Ben Habib. Ben Habib is actually going to be poorer for it, and he's going to stand shoulder to shoulder with the membership who've put up money. And I want to put up money alongside them so they know I'm completely in it with them. this has got, if we're going to save the United Kingdom, if we're to restore our constitution, our democracy, and so on, this has to be a party with integrity. It's got to have all the strength that goes with integrity that doesn't bend. And I think the fact that I'm putting money in, um, it's only one step. It's only one indication of the integrity that I wish this party to have, and I hope will have. But I think it's an important yardstick.
And we've all seen the sort of support you're getting from Elon Musk. How did that come about, and where will that lead to?
So Elon Musk, funnily enough, was the first person I spoke to who said you should start a new party. I had some correspondence with him in January this year, and it was him that said, come on, reform's not up to it. You should start a new party. And I had said to him in January that I didn't think it was easy. I thought it would be virtually impossible to start a new party in the UK, even though the two-party cultural disposition to vote for one of the Conservatives or Labour Party, that sort of cultural disposition that the British electorate tend to had, even though that had been broken and reform had now come in, I felt reform owned that space. But then when Rupert Lowe was thrown out of reform the way he was, and I'd seen, by the way, reform do that to dozens of other people. They just didn't make the headlines like Rupert did. And at that point, I thought there may be a political room for a new party because people could see what reform was really up to. And it was then that I contacted Rupert and said, look, we should set up a new party. And I contacted Elon and I said, I correct myself. When I first said, I think it's too difficult to start a new party, I correct myself. We're going to do it. And that was in March. And so the march towards the construction of Advance started in March. And it started with, tacit approval, I would say, of Elon. I wouldn't say it was really actively supporting, but he completely recognized the need for a new party. And then I set it up. Rupert, for reasons of his own, decided not to join. And I launched the party. And Elon Musk has had the opportunity to see how the party's evolved in its very early stages. And I think he likes what he sees and therefore endorsed it.
Mm. And quite a good, solid endorsement to get for a brand new party. Now, what's the roadmap then for Advance? You're going to get to the 30,000 within days. Okay, you're going to then set the party up properly. Is the end game to really give a good, strong push for the next general election and give yourself a sort of 3.5 year build up? Is that the plan?
So the first thing that I think the first challenge we've got to meet is convincing the British people of what's required to save this country. That, we must stand for the nation state of Great Britain and Northern Ireland in all its parts and for all its people. That we must stand for our Christian constitutional roots. I know people often talk about our cultural Christian roots and heritage, but I want to emphasize our constitutional Christian roots, that we must stand for freedom, which includes freedom of speech, the removal of indoctrination of our children, that we must stand for our democracy. And democracy is by definition domestic. It is in the United Kingdom that democracy must take place. And so we have to eject the tentacles of these supranational institutions and international law that has hijacked our country. And we've got to yank back power from the quangos and non-governmental agencies that have taken over the governance outside the democratic process of the United Kingdom. And lastly, we've got to establish in the British people's mind the absolute necessity for equality under the law, that we can't have this kind of positive discrimination in favor of ethnic minorities, minority religious beliefs, transgender ideology, and all of that. That can't be infecting our law in the way that we behave fundamentally as a nation. Lady Justice needs once more to be blindfolded. We've got to get rid of the two-tier criminal justice system. And these are the four things that I mentioned: nation state, freedom, democracy, and equality under the law. You'd think, Craig, that they are self-evidently the yardsticks by which all political parties should be governed, but they're not. In fact, no mainstream political party is governed by them, including Reform. And I can evidence that for you if you like. So it's driving that agenda, driving that narrative, making sure people understand what it is that we need to do as a country. That's critical. That's the first challenge that we have in advance. The second challenge then, which may be fought at the same time, but the second challenge is making an impact electorally and, getting the name of the party and a belief in the party into the electorate psyche. And then, having done those two things, we need to see what the electoral landscape looks like in 2028 and decide based on that, what strategy we use for the general election when it comes. What's critical, I think, and I think this will happen almost certainly. What's critical is to make sure that the next government is a pro-British government. It's a government that believes in this country and is going to live by the yardsticks that I've just set out, those 4 yardsticks. I think that's an inevitability because I have no doubt that Advance is going to be successful. No doubt, judging by the way we've got to 30,000 members so quickly, the backing we're getting, and every day I'm getting more backing, by the way. The momentum is building, and momentum begets momentum, as I'm sure you appreciate. And so I have no doubt that we'll make an impact. And through our impact, we will ensure that the next government is pro-British, whether that's some complexion of an amalgam of the parties that we've been discussing or an advanced UK government, as absurd as some people might think that is at the moment because we're such a new party. I think the electoral landscape's very febrile. We may surprise ourselves and find ourselves actually doing much, much better than we thought.
Yeah. And I think it can change like that. And an example I'll give is if Reform said and done nothing from July last year up until this next election, there's probably been a fair chance that Nigel Farage would have been the next Prime Minister. But unfortunately, they're incapable of doing that. And we hear horror stories almost daily now. So they're sinking. But that's only changed in the last probably 6 months. And the way that it came in, is when you started that election period, I think they were polling about 4 or 5%. Nigel came along and suddenly went up to 9%.
No. That's not quite right, actually, Crew. When I joined the party in March 23, we were polling 5 or 6%. And by the time of the general election, before Nigel came back, we were polling 16%. And Nigel then appointed himself leader during the course of the election, and we got 14% of the vote. Nigel likes to claim that he delivered the 5 seats, but actually I knew that we were going to get seats in the last general election. And that's why Farage came back, because he sensed, he got fear of missing out. That's why he came back.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you pointed that out to me, because I've just proven that I fell for the spin, and I kind of not.
His spin is superb, yeah.
This is how I view Reform myself. I view them as the perception is far greater than the actual. And if they just done what they say on the tin, it could be a fantastic party. But unfortunately, when you start digging deep, and a bit deeper than the man in the street would normally look at it, it's non-democratic. It's impossible to change the leader without the leader supporting change for the leader, which is never going to happen. And there's the things that we promise and we go and do total opposite. But the perception amongst a lot of people in the general public is not the reality of Reform. But I think a lot of people in Reform become almost cult-like because they truly believe that it's the only hope we have. So they don't want to see the facts. They don't want to listen to the truth. In my own journey with Reform, I went from a man in July last year that liked Reform. I was wanting the general election to finish. I was then going to approach Reform and ask them if they would please consider me to be a candidate at the Holyrood elections in 2026. And in the space of 24 hours before the general election, I had become a guy that went from that position to I could simply not even vote for them ever going forward. And that was based on me appreciating a few facts about them. And that was they had at least 4, and some number between 4 and 8 separatist nationalist candidates in Reform. And for those who are maybe not as up on speed with Scottish politics, these are people who want an independent Scotland, while Reform are selling the notion of being a unionist party behind a union flag. You don't do that. The second in command in Scotland was advocating for another referendum, and he too was a nationalist, and he's still the second in command. And the guy charged with Martin Green with recruiting and building it in Scotland has been reported to have been told to recruit nationalists to the party. And I'm very staunch in my unionist beliefs. And what you cannot stand behind a union flag and not appreciate that that's going to upset Scottish unionists. I've spoken to people in Northern Ireland who feel very, very similar, and they've read this very highly of you because of your beliefs that seem to be different from others who say they're unionists. It seems that you are a true unionist, and the components of the union are all equally important.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, I find it really peculiar, people who talk about the need for democracy in the United Kingdom. We're going to bring democracy back. Our parliamentarians are going to represent us and so on. When they can't simultaneously define the democratic unit of the United Kingdom. You can't stand for democracy in this country if you can't define the unit, which is our democratic unit. And that democratic unit, of course, is the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. That is our democratic unit. And Farage is on the record saying he sees a united Ireland as inevitable. He's on the record saying that he's happy to share a platform with Mary Lou MacDonald, who's the unapologetic leader of Sinn Féin, the political arm of what was the terrorist group, the IRA. People who'd bombed British citizens, killed people in London, Northern Ireland, and elsewhere. And I can't make any case for wanting to share a platform with Mary Lou MacDonald. I would never be able to say a united Ireland is inevitable. And even just last week, Craig, I don't know whether you followed it, but in this deportation policy that Farage came out with, he said, we're going to remove the European Convention of Human Rights from Great Britain, but not from Northern Ireland. Now, if you do that, what happens is all the migrants who are here illegally and don't want to be deported will rush straight over to Northern Ireland. They'll be protected there. He was throwing Northern Ireland again under the bus. And Farage has done this repeatedly. I don't know if you're aware, but I fought a battle against the Northern Ireland Protocol because the protocol created this Irish Sea border between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Farage didn't support me in that battle at all. But worse, during the general election last year, after I had established an alliance between Reform and the traditional unionist voice of Northern Ireland, who are very proudly pro-union, and we turned our backs on the DUP because the Democratic Unionist Party of Northern Ireland had basically supported the protocol. They'd come round to saying that the new arrangement, the new form of the protocol, which is called the Windsor Framework, had actually removed the Irish Sea border, which was a lie. And we all knew it was a lie. Farage knows it's a lie. The DUP lied about the border having gone. And so I established an alliance with the TUV, and I donated £50,000 to the TUV for their general election campaign. And I was standing shoulder to shoulder with Jim Allister, their leader. And then during the middle of the election, literally in the middle of the general election, Farage endorsed two DUP candidates, Sammy Wilson and Ian Paisley Jr., standing against our people. He endorsed candidates standing against our people. And so Farage is all over the place when it comes to the union. He doesn't get it. And Farage doesn't get a lot, I'm afraid. He doesn't have a political philosophy. Most of us who are in politics, whether or not you like the framework that any individual politician has, most of us in politics have a framework. We have a set of beliefs and principles around which we build our policy. And when problems are brought forward to us, we answer those problems using our framework as the method by which to determine what our answers should be, because it informs us. Our philosophy informs us how we react to new problems. Farage doesn't have political philosophy. And that's why you see him coming up with such weird answers to questions. You know, one minute he's saying the welfare state needs to be cut back. The next minute he's saying he's going to remove the cap on 2-child benefits.
Yeah.
One minute he's talking about the importance of unionism. And he's literally on the record saying devolution is a done deal, and I'm never going to reverse devolution. And he's recruiting nationalists into his party in Scotland. He's endorsed it, and so on and so forth. He's all over the place. And that's why he doesn't present the answer. That's why Reform doesn't present an answer to this country.
Yeah, and that was, as a proud Scottish Unionist, I wear that badge with honour. I'm not shy of it. One of the biggest reasons that I turned off Reform, because it's so important, and you shouldn't. It's not a unionist. Some of the arguments that came back to me from Reform members in Scotland was, no, we want our second referendum just to put it to bed forever. And well, that's ridiculous. It's not a unionist job to argue the point for a referendum, never mind, for the union. And I kind of think a lot of people down south, they don't understand what the Scottish Unionists went through 10 years ago. We weren't fighting for or against, an independent Scotland. I was fighting to save the Union. Because if that vote went the wrong way, it's not an independent Scotland that would have been the biggest issue. It would have been no United Kingdom.
Absolutely. The whole thing falls apart.
Yeah, it would need to be something else. So it was the death of the United Kingdom as far as I was concerned when we were voting for it. And I don't think a lot of people appreciate that. It's easy to say from 400 miles away, I'm a unionist. But to actually be in the trenches with people, and particularly Northern Ireland, which is why you came on my radar very, very strongly, was because of the people in Northern Ireland telling me your opinions in the protocol, your fights with Farage on protocol, and the things that happened in the general election over in Northern Ireland. And funny, some of the names that you were mentioning there, I was actually in Jim's office about 2 months ago. Unfortunately, it was in Parliament. Over to Ballymena when the riots started and covered it. And it was a great young boy, he was a DUP guy, he's a deputy mayor, interviewed him and some of the public and said, tell us a story. Because what we're seeing in the paper is wrong. That's not the whole story. People have not just decided to start bombing sports centres. And I went into his office. They were great, but unfortunately, and they did get back to me, but I was on the way back to the airport and invited me to go and do some interviews with some of the members back at that time. Was against it, but I will go back. And you don't do things like that. But we're living in a society where most people question the integrity of politicians. So if you want to tell us that you want to break the bubble and break the norm, then you need to the first thing you need is integrity. So when you do any deal with anybody, you shouldn't even need a signed piece of paper. Your word should be your bond. And to do that to the TUV and then expect to stand up in front of the nation and tell you I'm going to be the most, I've got all the integrity in the world, it's total nonsense. And absolutely, I despise them now. And I've no great, and I saw this movement should have been our great hope to give us the UK, and they've let us down. And we need something else. And I think, reading between the lines, I think that's what Advanced are trying to do, to offer the something else. That seemed like if you kind of fell for that nonsense, we'll give you the real deal. And I think that's kind of where
we are the real deal, Craig. We're not going to bend. I know that you're part of the SDP, for which I have a high regard, and for William Clouston, your leader.
Thank you.
The principles which govern the SDP are very similar to ours. But I can assure you, and I can assure anyone watching this, we're not going to bend. We're not going to bend in the pursuit of power. We are not going to bend on our 4 principles: nation state, freedom, democracy, and equality under the law. We're going to drive that home.
Yeah. Well, the political calendar, the next stepping stone is in the Holyrood elections 2026. Is it too early for Advance to be looking at that, or have you?
So, I mean, it depends. It depends on how we start doing in the polls. I mean, I think our focus is on 2029, which in itself is going to be quite a, big task for us to do from a standing start. But if we're flying, And we've got 100,000 members and our coffers are overflowing and we've got people wanting to stand and we've got good quality candidates and so on, then absolutely we'll do it. And the Senate elections are next year as well, in Wales. So we'll do that too. But of course, our ticket in many ways will be an anti-Holyrood ticket. We're anti-Holyrood. We're pro the union. I'm not in favor of Holyrood. I'm not in favor of the Senate.
Yeah, someone asked me, there was a party set up for Scotland, single ticket party, Abolish Holyrood. We don't need to talk about what the names are. And they asked me my thoughts on it. And my thoughts are quite simple. I don't know if Holyrood can work for Scotland. And the reason I have to say I don't know is it's been led for 17 years by the most abhorrent party in the history of Scottish politics, whose sole purpose is to destroy the union and actually blame everything on Westminster and take no responsibility for themselves. So what I'm saying to people is, see, for the next 5 years after an election, can we put some sensible people in the room, please? And I don't care what colour your rosette is. If you're a sensible person wanting to do what's best for Scotland, I am willing to and work, right? And what I want to do is take the book of devolved powers and don't use it, actually abuse it and wring it dry and take every last power out of it and try to use that for the benefit of Scotland. Now, that'll either be successful or it will fail. If it is successful, then you end up with a better Scotland. If it fails and you've actually genuinely tried to make it work, then there is no point in having Holyrood. And the very people that should be shouting from the rooftops to abolish Holyrood should actually be the nationalists. Because they keep telling us, oh, the drug deaths are terrible because of Westminster. And you think, well, we're taking all responsibility. And I need to share a story with you, Ben. I was watching First Minister's questions when they revealed that yet again, Scotland has the worst drug deaths in Europe. And John Swinney was challenged on it by the opposition. And he was asked to justify. And I kid you not, his excuse was Margaret Thatcher's policies. And I'm sitting like, do people fall for this? Now, I need to be honest with you. My first 20 years of my life, actually, it must be 40 years since any other policies affected then. But I was born in Linwood, which back in the 80s, it was formed for the car plant there. My dad was probably the only person in our street that didn't work at a car. And it got closed and it was devastation, right? And we were fortunate. My dad had his own business at this point and we moved up to a posh area. But devastation. So I was brought up in this environment where Maggie Thatcher was a devil. And then I grew up, I look back and you think, well, hold on, we had the worst factory that Chrysler owned in the world. And the production levels were terrible. Going out and strike when people get sacked for being drunk at their work, right? So you've kind of got to look at that. And I know Maggie Thatcher done some really good things, and I know she probably done some poor things, right? But to blame her on Scotland being the highest drug deaths in Europe is complete lunacy. And we that's who's meant to be running Scotland. So we need to change it. We need to get the adults in the room and give Holyrood a chance. And if at the end of that cycle it doesn't work, then yeah, let's look at banning it. And it should be it should be pushing for that.
You made a very powerful point, Craig, that Holyrood has some power but no responsibility. It doesn't actually have to stand by the failures of its decisions. It will just get bailed out, and it'll blame Westminster politically and economically. It'll rely on England effectively to bail out their bad decisions. And so they have all the soapbox drama and the beating of the drums, but none of the reality of governance. And so, you think you want the adults in the room. It's very hard to get adults in the room if there's no responsibility. Being an adult means taking responsibility, doesn't it?
100%. 100%. And that's why I became politically involved, because I just kept watching this SNP. Holyrood has the biggest effect on me as a Scottish Unionist because I live here. Right? Westminster does affect me, but you could argue Holyrood affects me even more so because the health, education, local taxes, all this stuff is administered from Holyrood. And what I've seen in 17 years, it just blew my mind and actually energised me enough to get involved in politics. And it's frightening. And I don't think, there's not a lot of people down south get it. And, you have to point out how terrible, in 17 years we've had. Can you imagine it? We can't have another 5 years. Scotland, and it's blame culture. And you're right, there is no acceptance of responsibility. And everything's
But it's structured like that, isn't it? It's structured there's no structure that, the structure of Holyrood itself removes responsibility. There are no consequences, because if you get it right, great. If they get it wrong, well, they just, blame someone else. It's like the Matt London.
Yes, and potentially is dangerous. I should know.
Well, he's very dangerous. It's very hard to rival Sadiq Khan in his danger. He's a very dangerous individual.
Yeah. Can I ask you, I know we're pushed for time, Ben. I'm really appreciative of the time you've given me. There's one thing I need to ask you, just from what happened with my journey as a Reform fan. It was quite short. If I'm right, on the run-up to the election, you were deputy chair?
Deputy
leader. Right. And Tice was the leader, right?
Tice was leader, yeah.
So when this stuff was going on in Scotland, I've spoken to people who are nationalists they went through the process to become a candidate. And I've asked them, surely the constitutional question in Scotland must have come up in your interview. Yes. And what did you say? Well, I told them I'm a nationalist. And you still became a candidate. We've got a second in charge who is...
And I didn't know this. This is news to me. I mean, this is just unbelievable.
Yeah. So you go, how did it happen? Right? And then there's only one paid employee in Scotland, Martin Green, for Reform, and people close to him have said that he admitted that he was told after the election to go and recruit even more nationalists for the party. How do these things happen? Who drives these things? Surely they're not being infiltrated by a bunch of mad Scottish people that just want to use Reform for whatever reason. Surely the head office, the leadership must know these things are went on, and even if they had been infiltrated, they had good time. And I know people that went and spoke to Nigel and spoke to the Tices of the world and explained to them what went on in Scotland. So they had the opportunity, if they were infiltrated in some way and it was somebody else's fault, to rectify it. But in Scotland, we still have the exact same set of man.
No, I mean, I think Farage I don't think Farage gives a damn. He'll do whatever is politically, makes sense at the time to get the most support he can. I mean, look at the recruits they're taking in. Jake Berry from the Conservative Party. This is a guy who voted Remain, was pro-lockdown, pro-vaccine, pro-net zero. I think these are things that we should all stand against. And they've taken in Liberal Democrats, they've taken Labour councillors. They just don't care where they get their people from. They don't care what the people think. They're just on the march for power. But this country is in deep trouble. It needs a set of policies that will save it. And you won't save it by giving power to the same people who put it in the danger in which we find ourselves now. We've got change. And Farage offers no change. He just offers more of the same. Sorry, yeah.
More blah, blah. No, it's just bluster, isn't it, to get to...
Yeah.
It's just as bluster. Okay, and one final thing, and you've got an opinion on Farage that I want to put to you, and you've been in a great position to tell me whether I'm right, wrong, or close, right? I don't term as a unionist in the true terminology. I think Nigel Farage would be quite happy to be an English nationalist.
Quite possibly. The thoughts cross my mind. But think about the map. Think about the map of England. How does that look on a global map when you take Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland out? We would be such a diminished country. Farage rightly fights for the Chagos. He hasn't, by the way, made any arguments for Gibraltar. Gibraltar's been handed over to the EU. Gibraltar's gone. Gibraltar is no longer a British overseas territory. It is gone. No one seems to give a damn. People really cared a bit about Chagos for reasons which are not entirely clear. Why Chagos got the national sort of mood, but Gibraltar didn't. And of course, the Falklands is next in line. We're going to give up the Falklands in a second. And this is how far we've fallen, Craig. In 1982, we launched our Army, Air Force, Navy to go 10,000 miles, whatever the distance is, to save 1,800 British citizens and 10,000 sheep. And now we will just hand over British territory, including Northern Ireland. Over 1 million British citizens in Northern Ireland. I despair. I despair at the damage done to this country. The lack of preparedness for politicians of every hue, a lack of preparedness to stand up for this country. And if you do stand up, you're some kind of radical extremist. I'll tell you who the extremists are. The extremists are the people who don't recognize the nation state of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The extremists are the people who've taken our borders down, the people who practice economic policies that are so deeply damaging to us that they're impoverishing the country and the people of this country. The extremists are the people who borrow, tax, spend. These are the extremists. Starmer is an extremist. The Conservative government before him was extreme in the way that it behaved. Boris Johnson's wave of immigration was an extreme policy. And now it falls to us to reverse all the damage they've done. And they accuse us of being extreme. No, we're the rational, balanced, middle of the road. We're going to put it right, serious adult people. We are here. I don't want to be here. I'm here because of the extremist position taken by people like Starmer and others before him.
Yeah. No, and I couldn't agree with you more. But over the last sort of 8 weeks, I've visited, stood on stages shoulder to shoulder with protesters in Peterhead, Aberdeen, Falkirk, Stirling, Ballymena, Manchester, London. I even went to Cali and Dover to see from my eyes how terrible the thing was. I then figured out, well, if they're coming in here through there, how did they get into Europe? I travelled alone to Lesbos to uncover the ridiculous things that's going on at our European borders. Right? Not only just in the UK, but even in my travels in France and in Greece, we've all got the same concerns. And we're told that we're wrong. And the good people of Britain, whenever I go and visit them, I say, you're not alone. The people in Ballymena and Glasgow, and we all have the same concerns. And most of them are the safety of our children, the safety of our females, the integrity of our borders. Can we have some more houses, please? These are the same sort of things that we all fear. And I wish you luck in your endeavours to change that. Well, that comes with a small caveat. It depends what you're doing in Scotland in 2026, because I would hate to be campaigning against you. But if you're not campaigning up here, we wouldn't be fighting. I don't think we would be fighting in the streets for votes, Ben.
I suspect we're political friends rather than foes, is how I'm reading it.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. And what I would like to say, if you're not coming to Scotland with your party to compete in the Scottish Holyrood election, it would be nice to have someone endorse me. And I'll look forward to that.
We're not campaigning and we're not standing. Absolutely, Craig.
100%. Yeah, and we won't be fighting, that's for sure. So I wish you luck. And listen, I can't thank you. I'm humbled and honoured to have you as a guest, and I look forward to.
No, thank you for having me on. I'm so glad we discussed the union. It very rarely gets discussed. Thank you.
It's the most important. If you're a unionist, one thing I've said at a lot of events I've went to, I take my passport with me, Ben, and I use it as a prop. And I say, the government of the United Kingdom's first job should be to these people here. If you have one of these or qualify for one of these, you should be the number one priority for the government of the United Kingdom. And when that stops, the whole thing, anything after that is wrong. This is what we need to get back to. And everything that we do, you must be putting these people first. If you're not a government of the United Kingdom. Kind of thing. It's as simple as that. No, listen, thank you very much for your time.
Nice seeing you.
Most enjoyable, and I hope it's not the last time.